It's the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank. An Emprise Bank debit card is good anywhere. You have access to 55,000 fee-free ATMs worldwide through the Allpoint ATM network. You can get the same kind of access to your money as any bank across the country while getting the value of working with a trusted partner in Emprise Bank. They're our partner impossible here at KC Sports Network. They're our partner impossible with the KCSN Draft Guide. They've been absolutely the best to work with. I promise you can trust them. You will love your experience working with them. Emprise Bank, member FDIC. It is good to be back. It's good to be back here with my friends, Maddie Lane, Craig Stout. And I don't know why I just said it feels good to be back. I don't think I've missed a show. I just had a really, really long weekend because I was playing golf. I played 90 holes of golf this weekend, and it just feels like it's been a week since I was gone. But Maddie Lane, what's good?
Whew. Big humble brag off the top. Okay. We'll set the stage for this show. That's all right. 90 holes of golf. Okay.
My Sticks golf clubs held up wonderfully.
We get it. You're an athlete. Understandable. We all got it. I'm doing well. It's a very humid Monday night, but I am happy to be in the middle of May talking football because this is where the action starts. Craig, are you ready for this jam-packed episode?
Jam-packed is an understatement. We got some non-Chiefs news that directly affects the Chiefs this week. So we're going to break it down live for you. Kent, I can't even say the bad news. As the defensive guy, I can't. I can't do it. So I'm going to need you to do this. I'm going to mute you in my headset while you do it. Just please go ahead and tell the people what happened yesterday.
You said bad news. I think the Chiefs just got a compensatory pick. There is no bad news here. The Kansas City Chiefs.
Maddie, is he asking about compensatory picks? I think I read his lips. I think he said compensatory picks.
He wasn't asking. He was informing the people that the Chiefs do in fact get a comp pick potentially of like a 6th or 7th rounder for Melvin Ingram. In May. They received this comp pick in May for next year's draft. That's what we are currently talking about. Yes.
I'm extremely excited. The Kansas City Chiefs put an unrestricted free agent tender on Melvin Ingram a couple days after the draft. I think basically more or less to kind of just secure their rights to him through the rest of the summer, essentially. And it was about 20. I think it was 20% more than what he made last year on his deal. But the Miami Dolphins said, screw that. We want Melvin Ingram on our football team. They paid him a 1-year, $5 million contract, which was more than his deal was going to be with the Kansas City Chiefs, pulling him away and pulling him off the unrestricted free agent tender. I'm not entirely sure which round the compensatory pick will fall under, but the Chiefs do secure an additional compensatory pick as part of this agreement that Melvin Ingram signed and how it worked for the Chiefs. So the Chiefs have lost their, I think they had some potential preference maybe on their defensive end or wanted to play some games. We can actually kind of unpack it. Let's talk here. Do we think the Chiefs were, do we think they were sad to lose Melvin Ingram? Do you think this was part of the plan, is they maybe just were kind of just trying to get something for him on the way out? What do you think?
But before we break down the move, let's talk about what Melvin Ingram brought to the Chiefs last year, I think, before we break down the move, just because, I think he does deserve a round of applause. He does deserve plenty of credit for what he did. I mean, there were times last year where, especially if you were watching the first quarter of a game in the playoffs, Melvin Ingram was the Chiefs' best defensive player, arguably, at least the guy that gave the most effort, the most energy, the guy that seemed to care the most and kind of ignite the fire when the defense would be playing well early on. So you could certainly make a case in very short spurts. He was incredibly impactful for what he did, the mentality he brought. There were times in the Bills game or other games down the stretch where a lot of the defense kind of looked ready just to get off the field and watch the offense go score. He never did. That, him, Nick Bolton, they never ever look like that. There's a couple guys, like he was one of them. So big credit for that. I do think that a guy this late in his career, he was playing well. He brought some juice as a pass rusher. He brought some good run defense. He was a good addition for the Chiefs during the middle of the year. Wouldn't you agree, Craig?
Oh yeah, he brought energy. He brought another guy, another big veteran presence to the room that the Chiefs felt like they could get a little bit of something from. I think we saw him play as a smart defender a lot, recognized a lot of stuff, brought the intensity up. I think everybody remembers that forced fumble, that Nick Bolton was able to take to the house. That was the kind of stuff that he brought, to the team. He was a massive addition to the point where a lot of people just basically genuinely considered him the Chiefs' best defensive end last year. I will say this. A lot of that production, a lot of his pressures, a lot of the things that you remember did happen early in games. It seemed like as the game went along, the intensity was still there, but maybe the production wasn't. Maybe he got guys with a couple moves early on in the game, wasn't able to keep that going all the way through the fourth quarter in most games. That being said, I think we were all going to be marginally comfortable with the defensive line depth with Melvin Ingram here. We felt that it was fine to potentially good. And now that he's not here, you're taking that defensive end, the guy that a lot of people thought was the best defensive end last year, taking that out of the room, and you added George Karlaftis, another high energy, another guy that's not going to quit all game long, but definitely a step down from a play ID, step down probably from production, just because rookies is hard to project that. So this was rough for me personally, because I really thought that the defensive line, especially defensive end room, would have been in a fairly good place going into 2022, and now I'm worried. I'm frankly worried about it.
Well, and that's the thing is like, I'm so glad that the Chiefs addressed the edge position quickly and early, and they took a big swing on a guy who's going to probably play a lot of snaps. How much production he's able to get in year one, we'll find out, right? But this team's having to kind of solve the problem of one of the worst defensive end groups in football last year. I mean, like, that's part of the problem. Frank Clark wasn't particularly great. Melvin Ingram had his good stretches for early in games, and he did that, make an impact, no doubt about it. But I mean, this team was, and guess what? They didn't replace Melvin Ingram. They didn't replace him. So I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Like this group, it's incomplete, and now without Melvin Ingram out of the mix. One thing I just want to bring up. It's no Doug can't, but I mean the Chiefs, like, Melvin Ingram never agreed to sign with the Chiefs ever. Like,
correct.
That's just a funny, like, that just makes me laugh a little bit. Like, it's like he never actively chose to be a Chief.
No, he never did. The Chiefs had to trade for him to get him. Now, granted, it seems like both the Steelers and then now the Dolphins are willing to pay him a lot more than the Chiefs were. And watching Melvin Ingram play, I don't think the Chiefs are necessarily wrong at the price point that they've put on him that other teams have. Like, I think there's a lot of people that are kind of freaking out about not having Melvin Ingram, and not in the way that Craig was about how it's going to impact depth and stuff like that. But I think there's people that actually saw him as somebody that moved the needle or that changed anything. No, he was still just all flashes. He was a veteran player that flashed once or twice early in a game and then just kind of tapered off as the game went on. I don't think it was an energy or an effort thing. It's just he's an older guy now that his best play was in spurts and a very limited role. Yes, it hurts the Chiefs to not have that player, but if you are concerned about the Chiefs, and Craig can attack me for this, but if you're concerned about the Chiefs' defensive ends without Melvin Ingram, the issue isn't not keeping Melvin Ingram. It's the lack of approaching it with anybody else going forward or in the past. Because like what Melvin Ingram brought to the Chiefs last year was good. It was very impactful, but I would say very easy to replicate by a lot of players in the NFL. Like he didn't do anything special.
I mean, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I look at it, I'm sad about Melvin Ingram not being on this team, because I look at the rest of the spots short of the Chiefs trading for somebody, and we'll get into them. We see some in the chat right now asking, what are the other options? We're going to get into those other options, but I don't love a lot of the other options. I would have rather preferred Melvin Ingram over a lot of those guys, not just because of what he brought last year. I think the veteran presence on the sidelines, I think you saw him interacting with a lot of guys, bringing a lot of guys up. A guy like George Karlaftis would learn so much from a Melvin Ingram, not just from,
Teach him how to use them short arms.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He's going to learn how to win with a little bit, undersized arms. And that is extremely valuable. So, I mean, if you're out there and you're, learning from all these long arm guys, just play this way, play with this sort of leverage. Melvin Ingram in that room is saying, hey, listen, this is how I did it. This is how you can come along with this. I was looking forward to that contribution to the room. Now, short of trading somebody, you're basically picking off the scrap heap. So it's not like it's a panic just because it's Melvin Ingram. It's more of, as Maddie alluded to, I don't love what they did at defensive end this year. I love the Karlaftis ad, and I hope that some of these guys are going to contribute, but I don't love the overall approach. So let me ask you guys this. Knowing that they didn't seem to be particularly interested in signing Melvin Ingram. I obviously put that tag on him, the UFA tag, and that's to be expected. Basically they got to rent half a season of Melvin Ingram to knock a 6th round pick back a year. Basically, if it's a 6th round,
they might be trading a future 6th.
That's basically what it was.
Yeah.
So I mean,
if it all works out.
If it works out that way, obviously guarantees and all that are going to determine the comp pick. But with that being said, do we think that there is a plan? Now, I know that we're going to say, of course, there's a plan. There's always a plan. But with the defensive end room in the spot that it is right now, do we think the Chiefs went, we're okay enough at defensive end? We believe in these young guys, or do we think that there is an alternative plan that's coming and they were just making sure that if Melvin Ingram signed with Miami, that they made sure to get a little something for him?
I think there's a plan, but I don't think you're gonna like it. Okay, so here's how I see it, and I think this has been one of the MOs of the Chiefs for the majority of this season when it comes to how they're navigating free agency, how they're navigating this season. They are staying extremely disciplined to their contracts, and I think honestly their negotiations last year were in the same kind of vein. They've been kind of playing some hardball as recently as last year. They weren't able to get a deal done with Melvin Ingram. And Melvin Ingram didn't sign for. We had the conversation this time last year. We'll use Melvin Ingram as an example. Melvin Ingram went and signed with the Steelers for very little, and we all went and said, "I would have paid that for Melvin Ingram this year. I would have done that." Well, okay, thanks, Maddie. But I think the Chiefs have a very defined plan on how much they're willing to spend for some of these veterans. And so, do I think that they're sniffing around? Are they looking to see what Jadeveon Clowney is going to run right now?
Don't spoil future segments, Kent.
Do I think that they're poking around veteran defensive ends that are still available on the roster that might have some talent? Yes. But I think they're staying pretty committed to operating within a constricted budget, just to try to stay disciplined. So I think there's a plan. I just don't know if there's really going to be any players that fall in that plan that we really like.
I think I kind of agree. I think there's definitely a plan, right? I think what happened is the Chiefs went out, they talked to Melvin Ingram. Melvin Ingram was shopping himself around. They got word back on what the price was going to be. And they said, no, we're not going to pay you that much money. We don't think that that's the move for our franchise. We're not going to pay you $5 million. I don't think the Chiefs wanted to pay him the $4.4 million that he was going to supposedly get on the tag, according to this, UFA tender, according to some people, right? I think they wanted to sign him for less than that. They found out that it wasn't going to happen. So they just slapped the tender on him because they know he's going to get more. I think the tender was directly put on him just because they knew he was going to go elsewhere. I don't think it was them actually fighting for or jockeying for position to bring him back. I think they just did it to recruit some assets because they could. Because if you were willing to actually pay him $4.4 million, why wouldn't you be willing to match $5 million? Or did he did he really straight up choose Miami? And that is possible. It's just, I think personally that that's the route they went. They found out that he was going to make more than they wanted to pay. They did this tender to get something out of it, which also means there is another plan. Because if you go back through Brett Veach right now, you can't come across a single interview or press conference or anytime he opens his mouth where he does not talk about the veteran defensive end market in free agency, how it got more expensive than they were planning on it being for the guys that they wanted. No, for the guys that they wanted. Like there was very specific level of player that they were looking at, and they went for more than what they anticipated. That's your I'm assuming your Von Millers, your Chandler Jones, these older guys that still got paid. I think there is a plan though. Like, I don't know who it's going to be. We're going to talk about some potential free agents moving in a little bit, but I think there's absolutely a plan. And I think they knew pretty early on that Ingram was, as soon as that tender came out, I think they knew they weren't going to get Melvin Ingram back. They were just trying to recoup some kind of asset for him because they traded something away.
But then how do you let your defensive end room get to here? That's my problem with it. Like, fill it out a little bit more. Listen, I got huge high hopes for Joshua Kaindoh. I hope Mike Dana continues to be a good base down defensive end that develops a little bit more. Obviously, they got a hell of a lot of guys that can blitz, but you're having to fabricate pressure with a lot of those guys. You're not really lining up with 4 dudes that are on the roster right now, and you're saying, hey, our 4 guys are better than your 5 guys, period. We know that we can generate pass rush with 4. We know we can win that way. That is scary to me. And that's including Chris Jones, who could have a career year. I mean, he could get back to where he was before, but he's typically done that with some help, with some outside help to prevent him from getting doubled all the time. I don't see that outside help coming. You're putting a lot of expectations on a lot of young players that haven't shown it at the NFL level yet. I would like a little more insulation. Because again, like I said, I was going to be fine with the defensive end room. Not great with the defensive end room with Melvin Ingram there. It was just going to be fine. Now for me, it's below fine. So I don't know. Let's talk about some guys that they could add to try and make me feel better. I'm getting sad.
We'll get there. But like,
yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there. I mean, we're gonna Maddie
I'm
this
ready.
episode. You know, I'm trying to make it a hard 30, and Maddie's, we're gonna probably go an hour. I think, like, if you look at the totality of this thing, like, we feel like we've had all these conversations about corner and edge and adding some insulation, but like this is the corner the Chiefs put themselves in, and so like I think they were willing to put themselves in this corner across the board and kind of play it through the draft and see what happens at the draft. And the board went really well for them for the long-term success of this football team and the short term. Don't get me wrong. They got a lot of guys that are probably going to contribute very quickly. And there's the reason to get excited about. The holes on this roster were not one first-round edge big. They were bigger. The holes on this roster were not one first-round defensive back. They were bigger. Nice. It might be 1 first, 1 fourth, and 2 sevenths. But this team seems willing to kind of ride with some young guys. They seem kind of willing to allow the, I don't want to say this to be a growing pain year, but this to be a year where the young guys are forced to have to play a lot. And that's just, it just kind of seems like that's how it's felt to them to this point, which makes me wonder, how aggressive are they going to be in addressing edge with a veteran? I hope so. I think it's valuable because I think there's just a lot more need there, but I just don't know what the line is for the Chiefs and how hard of a line they're drawing on how much they're willing to invest to get somebody.
Well, but look at the other players, the other young players they're riding with. They're guys they invested a lot in, right? Like at defensive line, defensive end, defensive line, it's just Karlaftis. You didn't invest a lot in Kaindoh. You didn't invest a lot in Malik Herring or Mike Dana. Like, these aren't guys they invested a ton in. There's not a reason to think based on their expenditure on them that they anticipate them or they should feel comfortable. That's entirely different saying, oh, we're okay riding with Trent McDuffie at corner versus Joshua Kaindoh at defensive end, right?
Sure.
Like, you spend an entire different amount of, capital to get them. So I do think that's different. I just keep going back. Brett Veach has done the whole host of interviews and stuff so far this offseason. Like, he has not stopped talking about defensive and veteran defensive ends. They've traded for Terrell Suggs. They've brought back Alex Okafor after releasing him. They traded for Melvin Ingram after trying to sign him. They routinely are trying to add some kind of veteran body, some other bodies into that room to help make it work so the young guys don't have to play all the time. I would be a little surprised if they are not trying to get something done. Doesn't mean it'll happen, But if they're not trying to get something done, whether that is waiting for June 1st cuts and hoping a Jaron Reed type guy falls, but preferably at defensive end, or just something along those lines. I do also want to say this. For Melvin Ingram, passed rush for the Chiefs 320 times, according to Pro Football Focus. He had 11 pressures on 320, pass rush reps. Now, the stats can be slightly different, depends on where you look, but like according to Pro Football Reference, has him at 11 pressures. He pass rushed over 300 times. Not a huge return there, right? Like, do we not think that Mike Dana wouldn't come close to replacing those exact numbers? Now, I understand that you'd have to replace Mike Dana afterwards. Craig's got these numbers queued up, so I'm setting him up.
He
to
looks,
come back
he's
no,
ready.
I'm setting him to come back because he actually has the pressure rate numbers. I'm just saying, I don't know if Melvin Ingram was so good that he is going to be irreplaceable by whether it is someone on the team or whether it's going to be somebody else they can still find in free agency, because he was not that productive for the Chiefs.
Now, I will say this. I grade pressures of my own accord. So this is me. It is subjective. I'm not trying to say that it's not.
I trust you more than an intern.
11 pressures came from Pro Football Reference. Pro Football Focus has them at 33. So there's a wide
I think
gap.
I'm actually closer to PFF.
Yeah, there's a wide gap
regard.
there. I throw that out there.
I am. I had him at right around a 9% pressure rate. So that would line up closer to what PFF had. Mike Dana was under 5% the year before. So this is 2 years that he's gotten a decent amount of snaps. Now, that being said, I don't want to use Mike Dana in that role. I want to use him as a base defensive end. He's a super smart guy that plays the run really well. I want to use him in that role. And, I'm more than happy pairing a more dynamic pass rusher that maybe is a little lighter in the pants than Steve Spagnuolo wants out there on the edge to rush after Mike Dana on later downs. I think that the combination of those two makes perfect sense to me, because I think it basically maximizes both of their abilities there. Problem is, they don't have that guy either. So, I'd like to have another one of those guys. So that's why, yes, I agree. Melvin Ingram, I think his impact was maybe a little bit overstated, but simultaneously, I think that, it was overstated because Chris Jones was playing so much better at defensive tackle. Let's be real here. He moved him inside. That was a major deal. But I do think he was fairly securely, for me, the second best defensive end on this team. And, I know everybody's going to say over that, but that's how I felt about it.
Do you think if they brought him back, do you think that you would walk into the first game in September thinking he was still supposed to be or going to be the second best? Or would he be the third best behind Karlaftis?
Third. I think third behind Karlaftis.
And I think there's a big difference between trying to replace your second best defensive end and trying to replace your third defensive end, who is your first guy off the bench. And especially because now it becomes more role specific. So I do think there is a bigger gap. There's a pretty big gap there between saying you're replacing your second best or starting defensive end versus your best or rotational or third best defensive end. So that Karlaftis move maybe gave them the comfort to go ahead and enact whatever this plan may be.
They also got older up front too, outside of Karlaftis. Every single guy that's back is just a year older. So you need more. You need to continue to build and grow that group. You probably need an injection of talent there. I'm still always just going to add the caveat of Mahomes, but
excuse me, Taylor Stallworth is younger than Jaron Reed.
Oh, my bad. So yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that there's a need there. How big of a need, you can have the debate. How willing the Chiefs are gonna, how strongly the Chiefs feel about the need there. What's gonna be fascinating, because I think that it's interesting. Like, we don't know how the negotiations with Melvin Ingram went either. Are we even sure they had great negotiations, period? Because the Chiefs weren't willing to pay $4 million last year. So did Melvin Ingram?
That's what I'm saying. I think they knew they were priced out relatively early on. I think they were aware.
Yeah. Or did they even try? Or how hard did they try? Or, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. Anyways, if they're going to go add somebody, who is it?
No. I got a sidetrack. You're getting a Maddie sidetrack right in the middle, right in between these two segments. This is what we got to do. It's a Monday. This is what happens. Well, Why do you guys think that Brett Veach is doing the media tour right now? Do you think he's just feeling himself after a great draft? Do you think that there is some kind of like overt power dynamic shift in the Chiefs, knowing that Andy Reid's tenure might be coming to a close in the next couple seasons, and that someone's got to take more power? And now all of a sudden, excuse me, Brett Veach is getting pushed out in the front. He's doing interviews with Florio. He's on with a podcast with Thomas Dimitroff talking about his building process. Like, he's doing the full media tour at a level that I don't think he has done in the past. So do you think it's circumstantial? Do you think it's him saying, oh, I just killed this draft, I know it, let me go tell everybody about it? Or is it they know somebody else kind of has to be the front of this team building, of this front office? It can't be Andy forever. Maybe it's time for Brett Veach to start getting some of the extra shine.
I think that there's a concerted effort to put Brett in front of people. Now, that could be because Brett did such a great job with the draft. We all agree with that. I think every single one of us agree that he absolutely slaughtered the draft. And it could just be that the typical Andy press tour that goes around there. Andy might just be saying, hey, listen, Brett, you did the work. You should get the plaudits here. You should take the victory lap here, because a lot of times we talk about Brett Veach and draft capital and him burning it and maybe not using it on positions of need, maybe reaching a little bit. You know, we've had those conversations over the past 3 years, and he expertly played the board. He really did. And I think everybody knows it. The Chiefs are widely regarded as having one of the top drafts in the league this year. It could just simply be Andy saying, hey, listen, man, this is your time of year. This is your time to shine. You killed it, and everybody thinks so. Everybody wants to talk to you. You get out there and handle all this.
Can I, Maddie, answer this a little bit?
No, you cannot. Nope. You have to Kent answer it.
Well, I will just say the Dimitroff interview happened a long time ago. So, like, if we're citing that as part of the media wave, it happened a long time ago.
Did it? I am
so excited. Yet. I didn't know he was on GM Journey, but I can't wait because those have been very, very good. I'm gonna nerd out about that. I think he's starting to get more pull, influence, comfortability within the position, and you've seen his growth so much over the last 4 years. And I'm not even necessarily just like how the team's built and all that stuff. I just think in general, like there's got to be a supreme level of comfort. The battery of Mahomes, or the battery of Mahomes, Reed, and Veach, the cohesiveness that they all have there. I just think there's probably some level of comfort and wanting him to get out there and maybe be a little bit more of a spokesman on behalf of the org. So like, I think there's a little bit of that. There's probably a little bit of that. Yeah, he's feeling himself and he should, because his draft was incredible. And I hope he's flexing. He should be. That thing was nuts. I'm still not over. I saw a picture of Trent McDuffie earlier today in a Chiefs jersey. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. Yeah, it's like you almost.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
Oh Great. Yeah. Oh hey, good football players just stacked on top of each other. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm looking too much into it. And I think he's done some of these things before, Joe. I think he's but I do think there's probably a little bit more willingness to put him out there than there has been, and he should. I think it's time for him to kind of blossom in that role, and I think he already has. I think you might be starting to see a little bit more ownership in the organization from him.
Yeah, I just was curious as to what your guys' thoughts were, because he really was doing a lot of the interviews now. And, we'll talk about stuff like this off of a podcast situation, just share some thoughts. And I'm still going to dip one toe into the side of Andy's tenure is going to be over sooner rather than later, just given age and health concerns. Somebody has to be seen as the face of stability around the team. I don't know if you can make that Eric Bieniemy right now. I don't know if you can bring Matt Nagy right back in and make it him after what happened in Chicago, especially if the turnaround is quicker than we might even think for Andy. So it's just, I wonder if it's just a little bit of positioning from that aspect, because now, if let's say Andy retires after this year, whatever happens going into next year, you still have this picture of Brett Veach being pushed as this stabilizing factor, and you're just kind of setting him up for that. I have one toe on that side that just says I can see politically how an organization would start to maneuver like the outward facing part of the front office towards him. And it just coincides with him having a lot of success in the draft last year at the way things turned out, and everybody assuming this draft class is going to be really good. Just seems like a good time for him to start doing something like that.
I think that's the right phrase, start to do something. Like, I don't think it hurts anything at all to have him out there. It can only help. And so like that's probably part of it too. It's good timing for him to be a little bit more out there in media as well, whether or not Andy's here. I don't think Andy's got at least 2 more seasons.
I would imagine. Yeah,
At
no, I
least
would
2 more, and I would
More.
bet a lot more. I'd bet like, okay, Maddie, if I set the line at 2.5 seasons, you taking the over or the under?
I'm gonna go the over only because it seems like they're doing enough resetting this year that he's gonna want to run it out. Had they come out and paid a lot of veterans or kept more players and made it seem more like they're all in right now, I would have definitely taken the under. Just the moves they made have pushed me to the over. But I don't. If you want to put it to 4.5, I'm taking the under. If you put it at 4.5, I'm taking the under.
Interesting. Interesting. Well,
Can we talk about defensive ends now?
Yeah,
I
had a transition set up perfectly.
I'm fidgety.
Time for a commercial.
Yeah, it is time for a commercial. No McAdoodles? Okay.
No, it has to be organic. You guys can't force me into this. You just expect that this is just going to happen. It doesn't flow out.
Don't look at me. I was just making a commercial joke. I had no intentions of forcing you into McAdoodles. That was all kid.
Listen, it just doesn't happen. You can't just bring it about like the good people brought a McAdoodles to Kansas City summer of this year. Like it doesn't just show up. You can't just be there. It takes a lot of hard work because you don't get to the best customer service, the best prices, and the best selection just by magicking it out of thin air. It takes dedication and hard work, the kind that you would expect out of a high quality liquor store like a McAdoodle. So if you're a franchisee and you want to put in that kind of hard work, then you know what? You should get a hold of Roger. Get a hold of him by sending an email to info@macadoodles.com and you can have your own. But know that it's going to take a lot of hard work because there's a standard to live up to. There is dedication that needs to happen. And there is just an expectation when you have a McAdoodles around, and your customers will have that expectation, which is why you need to invest in more McAdoodles in Kansas City, your neck of the woods, wherever it may be. That not just going to magic out of thin air, just like that commercial didn't magic out of thin air.
Oh, that was the best one yet.
That might be my favorite one. We've done like 100 of these, and that might be my favorite one ever. All right, defensive end time. Let's talk. Oh, by the way, thank you all so much for watching. Please hit the like. Please hit the subscribe button, and please tell me and tell us what defensive ends you want the Chiefs to go after. Free agents, trades. You tell us.
And how great the big institution is.
And how great. Yeah, hashtag Craig is great. But like, subscribe. It does great things for the channel. We got, a lot of you watching right now. We might be able to get a few more of y'all watching right now if you hit the like, subscribe, and leave some comments. It's good for the show as we grow it. So thank y'all so much. All right, let's talk about some defensive ends that could potentially fit in here. And there's a few that you could probably look at, but again, this is why I'm so curious, because I'm going to throw the name out here first. Probably still in Maddie's Thunder. He's got takes. Jadeveon Clowney. I think Jadeveon Clowney is going to probably cost more than Melvin Ingram. I think Jadeveon Clowney is going to want to try to warrant more than Melvin Ingram. Is Jadeveon Clowney a perfect fit? I'm not entirely sure from a cultural perspective. He's kind of a different guy, how he's approached things, I think, historically with his with his career, and he's kind of been a guy that's been a disappointment at times. But when you look at, physical profile, length, size, athleticism, he's probably the best. Is he the best edge left on the market, Maddie?
I think pretty comfortably, right? Like Jadeveon Clowney as a player is substantially better than Melvin Ingram as a player right now. Like, he's a better football player. I don't think that's much of a hot take. So like, you would definitely get better. The problem is the rumor swirling is that Cleveland offered him a 2-year, $24 million deal earlier on in the offseason. Now, maybe his price tag has had to come down since then, but is Clowney that much better? Is Clowney worth 2 years at $12 million a year versus whatever, some of these other guys we might talk about are going to be? I don't know. But like, in terms of talent or even what they put out on the field, yeah, he's the best guy available. He's also going to be the most expensive, and that's part of waiting it out this long. No one's going to cost more than him that's left. Like, he very clearly is, the belle of the ball left out there on the field. The problem is He's burned bridges at a couple teams because, like Kent said, he's a little bit of a different
A
guy in
couple?
the way he
Every-
approaches things.
every
He's
team?
not always the easiest guy to bring in and get along. He clearly plays better as a second or third fiddle when you have somebody else in the room that can keep him in line. And you had that with Myles Garrett in Cleveland. You had that with JJ Watt while he was healthy in Houston. When he was in Seattle, or was he was in Tennessee briefly, wasn't he? Or was
He
Yes, he
has
was.
signed. He has
Yeah.
signed 3 one-year deals.
Yeah. And so you put him in Tennessee. It's like, it depends on where he goes, how it's going to work out. I don't know if the Chiefs have the best infrastructure for him. I don't know if Chris Jones is the type of guy to keep him in line. Frank Clark, when he was younger and playing better, I could see the case being made for a guy that could help keep him in line. But given Frank Clark, some of his off the field stuff, the fact that his play is declining, it may be hard to see him as a guy that keeps Jadeveon Clowney in line. So I don't know if the Chiefs are in the best situation to go for him, despite him being the most talented guy out there.
I don't think the Chiefs should challenge him with that 10-foot pole. I'll be real there. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze.
It'd be
I
a complete
don't.
180 from every other move they've made this offseason.
Absolutely would. It seems like this team wants football character. And right now, Jadeveon Clowney does not appear to be that guy. Now, Maddie, Kent, I'll just real quick here. Let me ask you this. Do you think that anybody on the Chiefs has 16 sacks this year as a defensive end one? 16. That's a lot. Do you think
No.
anybody?
No.
I don't
I don't
think
know if they're going to have 16 sacks at the edge position.
Yeah, I don't know if the
Now,
defensive ends
they didn't-
add
I don't
up
think-
the 16.
They didn't have 16 at the edge position last year.
Okay. So there you
Probably.
go. Jadeveon Clowney's best 2 years in the last 4 years required J.J. Watt having 16 sacks in 2018 and Myles Garrett last year having 16 sacks. He earned 9 sacks playing second fiddle to those guys, both of those seasons. Now, it seems like a lot. People are going to look at that and go, hey, 9 sacks. That's a massive upgrade. He needs that other guy across from him. We've seen it time and time again. Seahawks tried it. The Titans tried it. Even Houston, when J.J. Watt was hurt, they tried it as well. He just does not fit. He doesn't play with the sort of intensity. He doesn't play with the sort of football character. Yeah, the talent is great. Don't get me wrong. The talent, the athleticism, all of that are ridiculous and they're awesome. I just don't think he fits. And like Maddie said, I don't think the infrastructure is there to try and maximize what he can do. I don't foresee another guy taking so much attention to where Jadeveon Clowney is going to get all these ridiculous one-on-one pass rush opportunities and a chance to do that for the kind of money that he's likely going to require.
Hey, real quick, guess how many sacks the edge position had for the Chiefs last year?
I don't see. You're trying to make me sad again.
Just
Here I am
guess.
trying to move on.
Just guess.
I'm going to guess 14.
Okay.
12 and
Maddie?
a half.
9.
Whew.
Oh, no, that's not fair. How many did Chris Jones get from defensive end, and you're not counting it?
Okay. Do we think half of his
It was
sacks
like
came
it was
from-
like 2. It was like 2 or 3.
I mean,
So close.
18 is 18 a sad stat? 'Cause it's still pretty sad.
No, it
Because
is.
Chris
No,
only
it's
had
a
9,
terrible
period.
stat. I'm not disagreeing with that.
No, don't Maddie it.
Okay, Craig, who's your guy? You hate
Who's
Jadeveon
my
Clowney.
guy?
Craig thinks Jadeveon Clowney is a bum and should not be on the football field for the Kansas City
Thank
Chiefs.
you.
They're
That
going
is
to sign
exactly
him now. You know
what
that,
I
right?
said.
You know how this works, right?
That is exactly what I said to the letter. If I got to pick somebody that's a free agent right now, I'm going to go with Trey Flowers. Certainly not a sexier name. And I'm not saying that he's going to be a stud defensive end, but you're raising the floor there. You're adding another veteran presence. You're adding in length. You're adding more power. We talked about Trey Flowers a couple seasons ago as a guy that it would make some sense for the Chiefs to bring in. He's still 29. You're just paying him on a 1-year deal. Yeah, he was unable to really play and be healthy the past couple of seasons, but he really has been a pretty decent pass rusher when he's healthy. And a lot of teams have recently counted on him to be kind of a primary pass rusher. The Chiefs could bring him in much in the same way that we talked about Melvin Ingram. You know, if he's your number 3, that's a good number 3. That's a really good number 3. And you're helping Karlaftis along by, you know, having a high football character guy in Trey Flowers, high football character guy in Frank Clark, helping him learn the ropes, helping him as a veteran guy. And he's not going to cost very much either.
And So I was gonna jump in at if we weren't gonna bring up Trey Flowers, if someone was gonna bring up Trey Flowers, I was gonna say like I think Trey Flowers is the guy that they use or that they address the position with that we're not overly excited about, and we don't know if he moves the needle
Mhm.
all that
That
much.
injury history, though, like
It's
look at
bad.
the
It's not good.
games he's been
It's not
playing. Like
good.
that, I think, is your big concern. Now, you would obviously have him play less snaps, but like not only has he not been productive on this massive contract he signed with Detroit, he's been often hurt. Like that's that's a
He's
concern,
he's played a total of 14 games in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
right? So I was just gonna, unless there was another specific person you guys want to talk about, I was gonna lump a couple veteran guys just kind of in together.
Go for it.
Cool. Okay.
And we're just talking free agency now too, because I'm pretty
Right.
sure there's another place you're gonna want to go. Yeah.
Right. No, yeah. No, this is just free agency. So, like, we're all talking about Melvin Ingram and missing out on what he brought. And I get it that, like, he did help the team, but, like, he was still an aging veteran that wasn't that good. Here's a group of veteran, defensive end free agents that are roughly the same age that have been more productive over the past 2 years that are still free agents. Jason Pierre-Paul. His last year was the worst one he's had, but 2 years ago he had 8 sacks for the Tampa Bay, 9.5 sacks for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2 years ago.
Does that guy know Steve Spagnuolo? I'm unclear.
Right. Jason Pierre-Paul. Carlos Dunlap got traded to Seattle 2 years ago. He had 8.5 sacks last year. You want to talk about a guy that is the literal picture perfect Steve Spagnuolo defensive end. We use that phrase a lot, but like that's Carlos Dunlap's kind of mantra around the league. This strong side defensive end that plays the run well, that gives you effort pass rush. Everson Griffin was like on the brink of being out of the NFL. Look at his last 3 years, 8 sacks, 6 sacks, despite being split up between 2 teams, even 5 sacks last year in a row. Like there's plenty of veteran free agents that were more productive or as productive as Melvin Ingram that are around the same age. If you're willing to play in that age bracket at that $3, $4, $5 million range, I think you can probably play with all of these guys. Like all these guys are going to be an option. They're all guys that have been around the multiple systems. They know how to play against the run and the pass. It's just, I don't think it's Ingram or bust when you're looking at these options that are available.
Everson Griffin, another shorter armed pass rusher as well, could be interesting. We're talking about, maybe that's a guy you want around Karlaftis to help a little bit there too.
All of those guys would be like all those guys that Maddie ran through and listed there would be great guys to help a young set of defensive ends. Not just Karlaftis, Joshua Kando. If you got help for him, Malik Herring, if he makes the roster, if you've got hope for him, those are the types of veterans that you want in the room. They've been around a long time. They're more than willing to, show these people the rope. They're not coming in with an ego or anything like that, especially at this point in the season. And you're hoping that you can have those guys bring them along. I'm all for all of those.
I'll throw this question in there for this particular discussion. That group you just talked about. Would you sign 2 of them? Would you just go double dip with those lower cost veteran type pass rushers, just kind of insulate yourself? I mean, if we're talking about Malik Herring potentially making the team, why not Everson Griffin and Carlos Dunlap here in the mix? Like, I bet you one of those guys that you just talked about goes for less than $4 million too, by the way.
Why not both? Because you want to give Joshua Kando, Malik Herring, Mike Dana, and George Karlaftis reps. That you want to be able to give them reps without having to. And if you sign both of those veterans, plus have Frank Clark, plus Mike Dana, who the team clearly trusts in spurts, not all the time, but in spurts or for certain situations, you are going to run into a little bit of a logjam. Not quality snaps necessarily, but you are going to run into a logjam of snap counts. And I don't know if any of those guys that we're kind of talking about are at the point of their career where they want to come in and be a 4th or 5th defensive end. You want to tell them they're going to be your 3rd guy, the first guy off the bench that's going to play in specific situations that benefit them. Sure, you want to tell them they're going to be a true backup. They might consider going somewhere else.
Now, I will say this. I'm not signing 2 of those guys. And you could throw in like a Justin Houston in there, who I think the ship has sailed. But I see a lot of that in the chat, so I wanted to address
Ryan Carrigan, there's another one that's on the list.
Ryan Kerrigan's another guy. Oh, man.
Oh,
Ryan
weird.
Kerrigan,
A short-arm Purdue pass rusher?
He can come in with George Karlaftis as well.
Wow.
I am fine with bringing in a veteran defensive end. Give me Akeem Hicks if you are adding 2 players along the defensive line. Give me some interior as well. I'd rather do that than spend two salaries of roughly the same amount at defensive end, because I do think that there are some young guys. Give me another body on the interior.
I mean, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to the idea. I kind of expected the Chiefs to play in this market a little bit. I just think they're staying pretty quiet and disciplined, and maybe they're not trying to show their hands entirely. They might have some things lined up already. Who knows? They might have some stuff.
Ogunjobi, if you want to go inside.
Ooh, yeah,
I
love
forgot
that too.
like a week ago that he was even a free agent still, because that contract fell apart with Cincinnati, maybe? Chicago. The Chicago Bears. Yeah, the contract like fell apart, and he was taking some meetings against. Like, there's obviously something medical going on there. But I mean, here's a guy that he's at 3 seasons over 5 sacks. He's coming off a 7-sack year for Cincinnati. Like, you just want an interior pass rusher. Larry Ogunjobi can do that. It's like, there's some potential guys out there. This always comes up. Do you think if the Chiefs can't find a defensive end, they would go to add more interior pass rush instead? And like, yes, it's a possibility. They also just tried it, and it didn't really work that well. Like, it very clearly didn't work that well. I don't think Steve Spagnuolo's defense is based around just getting interior pressure. He would rather have his defensive ends get pressure. So like, if you can't make it work from the outside, then sure, why not try a defensive end instead? Just, I don't think that they would ever, or they're going to go out again and be like, hey, let me get another pass rushing defensive tackle over a defensive end. Because it's just, the NFL doesn't work that way. 2 interior pass rushers is not a way to base your defense in the NFL. Like, no team has success with that unless it's Aaron Donald. And even then, they just flank him with a bunch of speed rushers every year. And it doesn't matter who it is. They have 10 sacks.
I would much rather the Chiefs just blitz the hell out of their linebackers than try and build around the interior. I mean, and they're going to.
They're going to. They will.
Have you seen the Chiefs were 8th in blitz percentage last year at 28%. Spagnuolo had to back off a little bit at times just because couldn't trust some of those corners when they were going through some injuries and stuff like that. Couldn't trust those guys in the secondary as much. With the secondary being improved, I fully and totally believe that Steve Spagnuolo is going to blitz even more. So I do think that there's going to be some pressure there, but my man loves to win with 4. So there are going to be more 4-man rushes than blitzes.
Thanks to everybody watching right now. Please hit the like. Please hit the subscribe button. Leave your comments. Tell us who you think the Chiefs should trade for, because that's what we're going to talk about next. And we did not talk about names in advance, but Maddie Lane, I know there's a guy I'm going to let you talk about.
Well, I mean, obviously there's one name that stands out in terms of a defensive end you might want to trade for, and he plays for the Chicago Bears. He was the best Chicago Bears defensive end last year, not Khalil Mack. It was one Robert Quinn. I think he had a career high, led the NFL with 18.5 sacks last year.
He was second, but yeah. Maybe he
second
did.
in the NFL.
He might. I'll look that up.
Second or maybe first in the NFL in sacks. Robert
I don't know.
Quinn.
Is that good?
Also familiar with Steve Spagnuolo, seeming he played for him with the Rams when Steve Spagnuolo was the head coach, and they were
a draft pick. I think he was a Spags draft pick.
He might have been his first or second draft pick, like first overall. Yeah. Very up and down career in terms of like when he's really good. And then he's had some down years in between, but like he still seems like he's at a point where he can rush the passer well. And that's what he does. His contract is very palatable. He had this weird meeting, like this weird official meeting with the Chicago Bears front office at a very strange time in the offseason that it made everyone swirl about like, well, wait a second. Is he now available for trade? Is he not? The Bears draft doesn't say they think they're competing anytime soon. So like, why not try to move him at this point in time for future picks? It makes a lot of sense for them. It would make a lot of sense for the Chiefs to go get him for his familiarity with Steve Spagnuolo, with the huge need at defensive end. I have no idea what you would need to get him away from the Bears. That's a different talk altogether. Some people think it'll be a high draft pick. Other people think because of his age and the contract he's on, it'll be a low draft pick. I have no idea, but like that's the name if you're looking for a trade that seems the most available that would very clearly give you the biggest impact.
Oh my goodness. No, that Robert Quinn would be your defensive end one. If you make that trade, you have a new DE1. Now he's an old one, but he is your new DE1. So if you are looking to push those chips in for this year. And again, we don't know what that is. I believe before the draft, we talked about the Leo Chanel pick. Like we were talking about how, oh man, I'd give that up in a heartbeat for Robert Quinn at this point. That was just us speculating. So I don't know what it's going to take. He's obviously had a conversation, with the organization about his future there. That either means to me that he's sticking around for a year, or he's looking at it as, hey, if we get to the trade deadline, maybe we reevaluate this situation, and having that conversation with them up front to say, hey, listen, be on the lookout here. If we're going through Justin Fields' growing pains, new coaching staff growing pains, I want out, and I want to go out to a contender. So Robert Quinn would make a lot of sense. I just don't know if he's available before the start of the year. That may be one of those that the Chiefs, if they were going to trade a pick for him, it might actually be more of a mid-season acquisition.
Well, the Chiefs right now, if they are getting a 6th-round pick for Melvin Ingram, have 12 picks in the 2023 NFL draft. Oh, the year that they host the draft. Weird. They have a 1st, a 2nd, 2 3rds, 2 4ths, a 5th, we believe 3 6ths with Melvin Ingram, and 2 7ths with the compensatory pick on top of their regular 7th-round pick. So this team has tons of draft capital to utilize to potentially make improvements. And I could definitely see, if Robert Quinn's available mid-season, I think the Chiefs would very much be in that market. Help prorate the contract down a little bit. Although the contract is manageable. I think we've looked at it before, and I think the cap hits aren't outstanding. And
I don't think you're locked in. I think that you have the
year to year or
to
less.
Be at the one holdup, in terms of even getting hyped about this, the Bears did nothing in the draft to make you think that they're willing to move on from Robert Quinn. They drafted Dominique Robinson, who is a 2-year defensive end after playing wide receiver at day 3 of the NFL draft. They would be starting Jeremiah Atachu and Travis Gibson at defensive end if they traded Robert Quinn.
Travis.
I love Travis.
I think, but they don't have the bodies, especially moving on from Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman, who's still a free agent too, all in this offseason. That would be a lot of defensive linemen out without heavily investing. Sure. Just that meeting was very weird. The meeting that Robert Quinn had with them was very weird. The fact that they're apparently ready to just ride it out this year, no matter how rough it may be, he might be an option. You would clearly want to get them on the phone as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, again, and that sort of leads me to believe that they know that they're going to start the season with him. They make those significant investments. They know that they're going to start the season with him. But, if that Bears team starts terribly,
they're going to.
Listen, Robert Quinn's been around this league for a long time. My man can sniff when that's coming. And it could be that he's looking at it and he's saying, hey, maybe make some plans. Maybe start looking at this a little bit because, I'm not really going to enjoy sticking around here if we are looking at another losing season.
I think you can tell pretty quick.
I think that's why they had a meeting.
That's why they had a meeting. Matt, any other names you want to throw out there before we get out of here?
Yeah, we stuck to just defensive end. I think that's good. We talked about Bradbury last week. I mean, if there's any other position you guys would even think they'd want to add before the season starts, throw even just a position or a name out there. But I think that's probably the only place they should look at.
Maybe we save it for another week or maybe Thursday if we find or never. Cool. That's going to do it for the KC Laboratory Live Edition. Thank you so much. We'll catch you later.